Commander ZYX stood before the massive holographic display, her forearms crossed in disbelief. The data streaming across the translucent blue screens defied everything the Galactic Survival Institute had established over the past 3 centuries. Her secondary eyes blinked rapidly while her primary ones remained fixed on the impossible numbers. "Run the calculations again," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had overseen 12,000 survival course graduates. The bioluminescent patches along her neck flickered with agitation. Lieutenant Korv, a young Centaurian with crystalline features, manipulated the holographic interface with nervous precision. "Commander, I've verified the data 17 times. The readings are accurate. The human subjects have somehow completed the Century trial in 23 hours and 47 minutes. The Century trial. Even the name carried weight throughout the galaxy. Designed by the most brilliant minds from 47 different species, it represented the ultimate test of survival, adaptation, and problem-solving. The average completion time was 96 standard years. The fastest recorded completion belonged to the Vortak Empire's elite warriors, who had managed it in 68 years after losing half their team. ZYX's mandibles clicked together in the Calaxian equivalent of grinding teeth. She had been skeptical when the Galactic Council insisted on including humans in the trial program. These strange bipedal creatures from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star had only achieved space travel within the last 2 centuries. They were newcomers, barely qualifying for the basic survival courses that most species completed as children. "Show me the feed from Sector 7, she ordered. The hologram shifted, displaying the harsh landscape of Kepler 442c, the trial planet. Volcanic ash storms raged across scarred terrain while temperature readings fluctuated between -40 and +60 degrees Celsius. Radiation levels that would kill most species within days painted the atmosphere in sickly green hues. This was where civilizations came to prove their worth, where the weak perished and the strong barely survived. In the center of the display, 3 human figures moved with purpose across the hellish landscape. They had constructed what appeared to be a mobile shelter from materials that should not have been available in that sector. More disturbing was their apparent comfort in conditions that had claimed the lives of thousands of supposedly superior beings. "How is this possible?" ZYX whispered, her translator struggling with the emotion in her voice. Dr. Veltar, the Institute's chief xenobiologist, materialized beside her through a shimmering transport beam. His massive frame, evolved from predators on a high-gravity world, dwarfed even ZYX's impressive stature. "Commander, you need to see the detailed analysis of their approach. It's unlike anything we've encountered." The display zoomed in on the humans. Sarah Chen, the team's engineer, was welding components together with what appeared to be a tool fashioned from meteorite fragments and local minerals. Her movements were efficient, purposeful, as if she had been working with such improvised equipment her entire life. Marcus Rodriguez, their biologist, was cultivating what looked like an entire ecosystem within their mobile habitat. Plants that had no business thriving in such conditions were producing food and oxygen at rates that defied botanical science. The third human, Elena Volkov, stood watch with a device that definitely had not been part of their standard equipment allowance. She had somehow fashioned a multi-spectrum scanner from the ruins of an ancient Vortak settlement they had discovered in hour 6 of their trial. "They're not following any known survival protocols," Dr. Veltar continued, his deep voice rumbling with professional fascination. "Standard procedure dictates establishing a secure base, rationing supplies, and carefully exploring outward in expanding circles." These humans began modifying their environment from the moment they landed. ZYX watched as Elena's scanner detected something beneath the volcanic ash. Within minutes, all 3 humans were excavating with tools they had crafted from debris. What they unearthed made ZYX's secondary heart skip a beat. "Is that a predecessor artifact?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The humans had discovered a partially intact atmospheric processor from the ancient race that had seeded survival caches across the galaxy before mysteriously vanishing. In 300 years of trials, only 7 such artifacts had been found, and none had been functional. Sarah Chen was already examining the device, her hands moving across its surface with an intuitive understanding that should have taken decades to develop. She began connecting it to their improvised power grid while Marcus prepared biological materials to feed into its processing chambers. No one has ever successfully activated a predecessor device, Dr. Veltar said quietly. The few specimens we've recovered required teams of specialists years to even partially understand their function. As they watched, the artifact hummed to life. The air around the humans shimmered as the processor began converting the toxic atmosphere into something breathable. But that wasn't the most remarkable part. The humans had somehow modified the device to also extract pure water from the atmospheric moisture and synthesize basic nutrients from the volcanic compounds in the soil. "Alert the Council," ZYX ordered. "This changes everything we thought we knew about human capabilities." Lieutenant Korv hesitated. "Commander, there's more." The humans have been communicating with each other using electromagnetic patterns that our monitoring equipment almost missed. They're coordinating at a level that suggests a form of collective intelligence we've never documented in their species. The display showed subtle hand gestures, specific positioning of their bodies, and even intentional modifications to their equipment that seemed to serve no purpose until viewed as a whole. The three humans were operating as a single organism, each anticipating the other's needs and actions with uncanny precision. "Show me their biometric data," ZYX commanded. The hologram filled with readouts that made no sense. Heart rates that should indicate panic remained steady under extreme stress. Brain activity patterns that should show confusion or fear instead displayed intense focus and creativity. Most disturbing of all, their cellular regeneration rates had increased by 40% since entering the trial environment. "They're adapting to the conditions in real time," Dr. Veltar observed. "Their bodies are literally evolving to better survive in this environment. We've never seen anything like it." Elena suddenly looked up at the sky, directly at their surveillance drone despite its cloaking technology. She smiled and waved as if greeting an old friend. Somehow, impossibly, she had detected their observation platform. "How did she?" Lieutenant Korv began. "Unknown," ZYX cut him off. "But I want to know everything about these humans. Pull their files, their species history, everything we have." The data that appeared made ZYX confusion deepen. Humans were relatively short-lived, had evolved on a world with moderate conditions, and showed no remarkable physical capabilities compared to other galactic species. Their technology was advanced but not revolutionary. Their military record against other species was mixed at best. Nothing in their profile suggested they should be capable of what she was witnessing. "Commander," Dr. Veltar said slowly, "I think we've been fundamentally wrong about human nature. Look at their planet's history." New data cascaded across the display. Wars, natural disasters, mass extinctions, climate changes, pandemics, resource depletion. The list of catastrophes that humans had not only survived but overcome was staggering. Their entire evolutionary history was one of adaptation, innovation, and persistence in the face of impossible odds. "They're not succeeding despite being newcomers to the galaxy," ZYX realized. "They're succeeding because of what they learned becoming space-capable in the first place." On the planet below, the humans had activated additional predecessor devices they had somehow located using techniques that appeared to blend science with intuition. Their small shelter had expanded into a thriving base that was converting the local environment into something hospitable for life. But they weren't just surviving. Marcus had begun cultivating hybrid plants that combined Earth genetics with local flora, creating species that could thrive in conditions that would kill either parent plant. Sarah had reverse-engineered enough of the predecessor technology to begin manufacturing tools and equipment that surpassed what they had started with. Elena was mapping not just the planet's surface but its entire ecosystem, identifying resources and patterns that the Institute's own surveys had missed. "They're not just passing the trial," ZYX said with growing amazement. "They're improving the planet." A new alert chimed across the display. The humans had achieved something unprecedented. They had made contact with the planet's indigenous microbial life and somehow established a symbiotic relationship. Organisms that had been hostile to all previous trial participants were now actively assisting the humans in their environmental modifications. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Korv whispered. The local microbes have killed every previous group that encountered them. They're like a planetary immune system that attacks any foreign presence. But, on the display, the humans moved through clouds of bioluminescent microorganisms that swirled around them like protective auras. The organisms were actively cleaning toxins from the air around the humans while providing them with nutrients and information about optimal routes through the dangerous terrain. How long until they reached the final objective? ZYX asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. At their current rate of progress, approximately 12 hours, Dr. Veltar replied. Commander, I recommend we immediately convene an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The implications of what we're witnessing extend far beyond a simple survival trial. ZYX nodded grimly. These humans weren't just completing the century trial in record time. They were demonstrating capabilities that called into question everything the galaxy thought it knew about survival, adaptation, and intelligence itself. If these three individuals could accomplish what entire civilizations had failed to achieve over decades, what did that say about humanity as a whole? More importantly, what did it say about their place in the galactic community? Suddenly, the decision to invite humans to join the Galactic Alliance seemed less like charity and more like a necessity. A species that could adapt this quickly, this effectively, to any environment might be exactly what the galaxy needed in the uncertain times ahead. As she watched the humans continue their impossible journey, ZYX couldn't shake the feeling that this trial was revealing not just human capabilities, but human potential. And that potential might be far greater than anyone had imagined. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of Commander ZYX's alert. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber of Unity Station, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, electromagnetic pulses, and quantum fluctuations. The tension was palpable as beings who normally spent months debating minor trade agreements faced a crisis that could reshape their understanding of galactic hierarchy. High Chancellor Mordun, a crystalline entity whose thoughts manifested as shifting geometric patterns within his translucent body, called the assembly to order. His voice resonated through multiple dimensions, reaching every being present regardless of their auditory capabilities. We are here to discuss the unprecedented performance of the human trial subjects on Kepler 442c, he announced. Commander ZYX, present your findings. The holographic display materialized at the center of the chamber, showing real-time footage of the three humans who continued to defy everything the galaxy's greatest minds had established as possible. They had now completed 87% of the century trial in less than 24 hours, but their achievements went far beyond mere speed. Honored representatives, ZYX began, her forearms gesturing toward the display. What you are witnessing challenges our fundamental understanding of survival, adaptation, and intelligence. The humans have not merely completed trial objectives. They have transformed them. The display showed the humans' latest accomplishment. They had successfully tamed a pack of voidstalkers, the apex predators that had claimed the lives of countless previous trial participants. These creatures, evolved to hunt in the planet's harsh environment, were now working alongside the humans as partners in their exploration. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zentorian High Command leaned forward, her crystalline features reflecting the holographic light. Impossible. Voidstalkers cannot be domesticated. Their neural structure lacks the capacity for cooperative behavior with non-native species. That was our understanding as well, Dr. Veltar responded, materializing beside ZYX. However, the humans approached them not as predators to be avoided or conquered, but as fellow survivors to be understood. Marcus Rodriguez, their biologist, spent 3 hours observing their hunting patterns before developing a chemical compound that mimics their pack recognition pheromones. The footage showed Marcus approaching the massive creatures with steady, confident movements. Rather than showing fear or aggression, he demonstrated respect for their territorial boundaries while offering gifts of processed nutrients that perfectly matched their dietary requirements. Within an hour, the pack leader was allowing him to examine their young for parasites. Representative Threxalt, whose species had dominated galactic military affairs for millennia, spoke with barely contained skepticism. These creatures have killed trained warriors from our finest regiments. How does a human with no combat training succeed where our elite forces fail? Because they didn't treat it as a combat situation, Elena Volkov's voice came through the chamber's audio system. Somehow, the humans had detected and tapped into the Council's observation network. We treat survival as cooperation, not conquest. The assembled representatives erupted in chaos. Security protocols engaged immediately, but the humans had somehow accessed their quantum encrypted communications without triggering a single alarm. Elena's face appeared on auxiliary displays throughout the chamber, her expression friendly but determined. "Apologies for the intrusion," she continued, "but we thought it was time for a direct conversation. We've been aware of your observations since hour 2 of our trial." Sarah Chan's voice joined the transmission. "The electromagnetic signatures of your monitoring equipment create interference patterns that are quite obvious once you know what to look for. We didn't want to be rude by acknowledging it earlier." Chancellor Mordun's geometric patterns shifted rapidly, indicating extreme agitation. "How are you accessing our communications?" "Your quantum encryption is actually quite elegant," Sarah explained. "But it assumes that consciousness can only interface with quantum states through technological intermediaries. Human consciousness has a more direct relationship with quantum mechanics than your models account for." This statement sent shockwaves through the assembly. Several species had spent centuries trying to achieve direct quantum consciousness interface, considering it the ultimate expression of evolved intelligence. If humans possessed this ability naturally, it would explain their impossible performance on the trial. Marcus's voice joined the conversation. "We don't want to disrupt your proceedings. We just thought you should know that we've discovered something important on the planet. Something that changes the context of this entire trial." The holographic display shifted to show a massive structure buried beneath the planet's surface. The architecture was unmistakably predecessor, but its scale dwarfed anything previously discovered. The humans had uncovered what appeared to be an entire city, preserved in a state of quantum suspension. "We found it by following the patterns the microorganisms were trying to show us," Marcus explained. "They weren't attacking previous trial groups. They were trying to guide them to this location. The planet itself is a massive test, but not the kind you thought." Elena's image reappeared on the displays. The predecessors didn't disappear. They evolved beyond physical existence, but they left this place as a final examination for species that might be ready to join them. The century trial, as you understand it, is actually the preliminary test. What we've discovered down here is the real challenge." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Survival Institute had been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding for 3 centuries. What they had considered the ultimate survival test was merely the entrance exam for something far greater. Ambassador Vorthek, whose species prided themselves on historical scholarship, spoke carefully. "If this is true, then every species that has completed the century trial has failed the actual test." "Not failed," Sarah corrected gently. "Just not been ready yet. The predecessor's technology requires a specific type of consciousness to activate fully. A consciousness that can interface directly with quantum states while maintaining individual identity and cooperative behavior. The humans had somehow achieved what the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had been striving toward for millennia. But, rather than using this advantage to dominate or demand recognition, they were sharing their discovery freely with the Council." Dr. Veltar's deep voice carried new respect as he addressed the chamber. "The humans have activated 17 predecessor installations in the past 6 hours. Each activation has provided technological advances that would normally take our combined species decades to achieve. They're not just passing the test. They're revolutionizing our understanding of what's possible." Representative Quindar of the Hive Mind Collective, whose species communicated through shared consciousness, asked the question that dominated every mind present. "What do the humans want in return for this knowledge?" A moment of silence passed before Marcus answered. "Nothing, actually. Knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. Survival isn't a zero-sum game where one species' success requires another's failure. We've learned that cooperation produces outcomes that benefit everyone." The display showed the humans' base, which had evolved into something that looked like a small city. But, unlike the sterile constructions typical of most species, this settlement seemed to breathe with life. Hybrid plants created living walls that cleaned the air while providing food. Water systems flowed through channels that also served as transportation networks. The symbiotic microorganisms had been integrated into every system, creating a closed-loop ecosystem that actually improved the planet's environment. They're terraforming the planet through cooperation rather than conquest, Commander ZYX Thera observed. And, they're doing it faster than our best terraforming technology could achieve through brute force. Elena's voice carried a note of excitement. We've discovered something else. The predecessor city contains knowledge of other trial worlds, other tests that were meant to guide species toward cooperative evolution rather than competitive domination. The galaxy is full of opportunities for growth that we've been overlooking because we've been thinking about survival all wrong. The humans had discovered not just a new approach to survival, but a new philosophy of existence. Instead of seeing the universe as a hostile environment to be conquered, they saw it as a complex system to be understood and integrated with. This perspective had allowed them to achieve in hours what others had failed to accomplish in decades. Chancellor Mordun's pattern stabilized into what those familiar with his species recognized as deep contemplation. The implications of your discoveries extend far beyond this trial. If your approach can be taught to other species, it could transform our entire understanding of galactic civilization. That's what we're hoping, Sarah replied. But, it requires a shift in thinking that can't be forced. Each species has to discover their own path to cooperative consciousness. We can share what we've learned, but the actual growth has to come from within. The humans had accomplished something unprecedented. They had not only completed the impossible trial but had revealed that the trial itself was based on limited understanding. More importantly, they had done so while maintaining their core values of cooperation, respect, and mutual aid. As the session continued, it became clear that humanity's entry into the galactic community represented more than just another species joining the alliance. It marked the beginning of a new era of understanding, one where survival was measured not by individual achievement but by collective growth. The three humans on Kepler 442c were about to change everything, not through conquest or domination, but through the simple revolutionary act of treating survival as a team sport where everyone could win. The final phase of the trial began at hour 23, and the entire galaxy watched. What had started as a routine survival test had become the most observed event in galactic history. Representatives from species that had never shown interest in the Century trial were now requesting access to the observation feeds. Even the enigmatic void-touched, being so advanced they rarely acknowledged the existence of younger species, had sent emissaries to witness the humans' attempt at the true predecessor challenge. Deep within the buried city on Kepler 442c, Sarachin stood before a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with energies that predated most known civilizations. The quantum consciousness interface, according to the data they had decoded from predecessor archives, was the final test of a species' readiness to evolve beyond physical limitations. Countless civilizations had attempted to activate it over millions of years. None had succeeded. The energy patterns are unlike anything we've encountered, she reported to her team, and, unknown to her, the billions of beings monitoring their progress. It's not just technology. It's alive, in a way that transcends our normal understanding of life. Marcus Rodriguez knelt beside a pool of liquid that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. His scanners indicated that the substance existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its molecular structure shifting based on the observer's consciousness. The biological components are responding to our presence, but not in any way I can categorize. It's as if the pool is trying to communicate at a genetic level. Elena Volkov stood at what appeared to be a control panel, but her hands hovered uncertainly above surfaces that changed configuration as she watched. The interface systems are adaptive. They're reshaping themselves based on our neural patterns. Whatever the predecessors built here, they designed it to work with any form of consciousness sophisticated enough to reach this point. In the observation chamber aboard Unity Station, the assembled council watched with a mixture of anticipation and dread. If the humans succeeded in activating the predecessor's final test, it would prove that a relative newcomer species had achieved what the galaxy's most ancient civilizations had deemed impossible. If they failed, they would likely join the countless others whose remains decorated trial planets across the galaxy. Biometric readings are off the charts, Dr. Veltar reported. The human's brain activity has synchronized to a degree that should be impossible without technological assistance. They're operating as a single consciousness while maintaining individual personalities. Commander ZYX Thera studied the data streams with growing amazement. Look at their problem-solving approach. Most species that reach this point try to master the technology through force or intellectual superiority. The humans are trying to befriend it. Indeed, rather than attempting to command or dominate the alien systems, the three humans were engaging with them as they had with everything else on the planet. Sarah was speaking to the crystalline structure as if it were a living being, explaining their intentions and asking for cooperation. Marcus was offering biological samples from their hybrid plants to the dimensional pool, creating a gift exchange with technology that existed beyond normal spacetime. Elena was humming, producing acoustic vibrations that somehow resonated with the adaptive control systems. They're treating a cosmic-level technology as if it's a nervous animal that needs reassurance, Ambassador Kethvar observed with disbelief. And it's working, Chancellor Mordun replied, his geometric patterns displaying unprecedented complexity. The predecessor systems are responding to their approach. Look at the energy levels. The crystalline structure had begun to glow with increasing intensity, but, instead of the harsh, cold light that most advanced technology produced, it emanated a warm radiance that seemed to invite rather than intimidate. The dimensional pool was clearing, its chaotic swirling settling into patterns that resembled neural networks or root systems. The adaptive controls were stabilizing into configurations that appeared almost organic in their elegant functionality. They've achieved partial activation, Dr. Veltar announced. But, this is only the beginning. According to our understanding of predecessor technology, the real test begins now. The chamber around the humans transformed. Walls became transparent, revealing the vast scope of the buried city stretching in all directions. But, more than that, the space itself began to exist in multiple dimensions, showing not just the present moment but echoes of the past and possibilities of the future. The humans were no longer in a simple room but in a nexus point where consciousness itself could interact directly with the fabric of reality. Initiating quantum consciousness merge, Elena announced calmly, as if discussing the weather rather than attempting something that could disintegrate their minds across multiple dimensions. What happened next defied every model of consciousness that galactic science had developed. Instead of losing their individual identities in the overwhelming complexity of the quantum interface, the humans maintained their distinct personalities while simultaneously becoming part of a larger awareness that included the planet, the technology, and echoes of the predecessor civilization itself. Sarah's engineering expertise suddenly encompassed technologies that existed across multiple realities. She began modifying the crystalline structure not through manipulation of physical components, but by directly influencing the quantum probabilities that determined its configuration. Marcus found himself understanding lifeforms that existed as pure information, biological concepts that had never been constrained by DNA or cellular structure. Elena's consciousness expanded to encompass communication networks that spanned galaxies, allowing her to perceive the true scope of what the predecessors had built. But they didn't lose themselves in this expansion of awareness. Instead, they maintained their human perspective while gaining cosmic understanding, creating a unique hybrid consciousness that was greater than the sum of its parts while remaining fundamentally human. "This is unprecedented," whispered Representative Threxalt. They're successfully interfacing with predecessor consciousness technology while maintaining species identity. How is this possible? The answer became clear as the humans began to speak, their words carrying harmonics that resonated across multiple dimensions. They were not just talking to each other but to the ancient predecessor entities that still existed within the quantum substrate of their technology. "We understand now," Sarah said, her voice somehow carrying the weight of eons. The test was never about survival in a hostile environment. It was about proving that a species could evolve beyond competition while maintaining compassion. Marcus continued the thought seamlessly. The predecessors didn't disappear. They transcended physical existence but remained to guide species that could demonstrate true cooperative consciousness. Elena completed the revelation. This entire trial system exists throughout the galaxy, waiting for species that can grow beyond the need to dominate. The humans succeeded not because we're superior, but because we approached challenges as opportunities for mutual growth rather than zero-sum competitions. The crystalline structure reached full activation, and, suddenly, the chamber was filled with presence. Not physical beings, but consciousness entities that had once been the predecessor civilization. They communicated through direct consciousness transfer, sharing concepts that had no equivalent in physical language. The assembled Galactic Council received this communication through the humans, who served as translators between transcendent consciousness and material reality. The message was both simple and revolutionary. The galaxy was full of species ready to take the next step in evolution, but they had been held back by competitive rather than cooperative paradigms. The humans have passed the true test, Chancellor Mordon announced to the assembly. They have proven that consciousness can evolve beyond physical limitations while maintaining ethical core values. But the humans weren't finished. Having established contact with predecessor consciousness, they began sharing what they had learned with the observing galaxy. Through the quantum interface, they transmitted not just data but experiential knowledge that allowed other species to understand cooperative consciousness directly. We're opening the pathway for others, Elena explained. The predecessor technology is designed to teach, not to test. Every species can access this level of understanding if they're willing to let go of competitive paradigms. Species after species reported successful activation of dormant predecessor sites throughout their territories. Technology that had remained inert for millions of years suddenly came online as civilizations began approaching it with cooperation rather than conquest. The galaxy was experiencing a consciousness revolution triggered by humanity's example. Commander ZYX watched the readings in amazement. They've completed the century trial in 23 hours and 47 minutes, but that's the least impressive part of their achievement. They've potentially altered the evolutionary trajectory of galactic civilization. The humans had done more than survive an impossible test. They had revealed that the test itself was designed to teach rather than eliminate. By approaching every challenge with cooperation, respect, and mutual aid, they had unlocked possibilities that competitive species had never imagined. As the trial officially ended, the three humans stood in the heart of the predecessor city, no longer as mere survivors but as bridges between material existence and transcendent consciousness. They had proven that evolution didn't require abandoning one's essential nature but rather fulfilling it through cooperation with others. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had arrived not as conquerors or supplicants, but as teachers of a truth that had been waiting millions of years for a species wise enough to understand. In the vast cosmos, survival wasn't about being the strongest or smartest. It was about being kind enough to help others thrive, and that was something humans had always excelled at, even before they reached for the stars. The century trial was complete, but for humanity and the galaxy, the real adventure was just beginning.